Namaste. Welcome to this session. Uh, we are considering the concept of Ishvara, and we came to a point that we are trying to address the Astikas, and then Astikas have the Shraddha, have the faith, have the belief in God. But just having faith in God, belief in God, is not sufficient, particularly for a seeker in Adhyatma, a seeker in Paramartha. Maybe a worldly man, it is enough for him to have faith in God. But to reinforce the position of Astikas and to reinforce the very Astik culture, it is important that there is definitely an inquiry into concept of God. And Astikas have an advantage that they believe in Vedas. Vedas are apaurushaya. Vedas are eternal. Vedas are Shrutis. And not only that, Vedas have postulated divinity, but the Vedas, Vedanta, the age-old Vedic parampara, has made postulations and has also strengthened the position to be having astikya buddhi, to be having belief in God. So the point is that they believe in Shastras, they believe in Vedas, they believe in Shrutis, they believe in Smrutis, they believe in Itihasa, Purana, Shastras, and therefore, for a spiritual seeker, he needs to look into Shastras and get to know about what has been said about God, Bhagwan, divinity, Brahman, from time without beginning. There is a long parampara, a lot of literature has come up. In lot of ways, the divinity is not only described, the divinity is praised. The intriguing concept of divinity has been explained for common man, layman, what we have been calling as agama, which gets mounted on our intelligence and strengthens our position for Shraddha, strengthens our position for belief. So it is as to why should we believe in God? If we are believing in God, why is it that we are believing? And why should we be believing? This is a matter of inquiry for spiritual seekers, not those who are sunk in mundanity, materiality. For them it is enough to just believe in God. But anyway, as student of Paramartha, as student of philosophy, as student of religion, as student of dharma, as student of tattva gnana, as student of yoga more particularly, it is important to look into what the sages, seers, Vedas, Shastras have said about this a glorious entity. So we are going to look into description of divinity in the Shastras, Vedas, Vedanta, Itihas, Puran, Gospels of Saints, what is called as Vachanamrita. And that will provide logical basis of reasoning, the basis of reason for Shraddha, which is so important. Otherwise, many times the Shraddha can really blow away with situations in life, with conditions coming, with profanes putting their positions. So many the Shraddha can be a weak aspect if there is no reinforcement to it, and therefore we are going to look into Shrutis. It is the scriptures which give us knowledge about divinity, God, Bhagavan, Brahma Tattva. It is not a matter of knowledge that will come by direct perception and inference. Scriptures, Shastras, Agamas, Nigamas only tell us and only give us knowledge about it. So we are trying to get knowledge to reinforce our Shraddha, Buddhi, to reinforce our Shraddha so that it won't be shaken, and more importantly, one will be convinced about what the divinity is, what the God is, what the Ishvara is, what Bhagavan is, what Paramatma is, what Parabrahma is, what Brahma is, and therefore this endeavor. What comes to my mind right at the outset, right at the beginning, is the mention that comes in Kathopanishad. Kathopanishad in its mantra 1-3-1. It beautifully describes this principle that we are discussing. It says beautifully and with a wonderful kind of metaphor. It says this entity is truth drunken. Truth drunken, to put very literally. Rhythm pibantau. So it tells us about, rather than merely saying that he is manifestation of truth, he is complete truth, he is truth outside in, inside out, he is completely subsumed by truth, he is truth itself, he is personified truth itself. So these are the descriptions that we can be having on our own. But here is the Upanishad which beautifully puts it, Rutam pibantau. Literally it means he is truth drunken. The principle that we are discussing is truth drunken. Just as a drunken one is in its own world. The drunken people have their own world. They have also what we call as hangover. They are in that their own world and they have their hangover as well. So much so that nothing can influence them. The worldly radiations don't influence them. That's why the mortals take recourse to this addiction, that when they are drunk, the world around them doesn't bother them. It doesn't reach them even. So that is how the word drunken means. And now here, this principle is truth drunken. Rutam pibantau, rutam satyam. So, therefore, the divinity is in its own world. Why divinity is untouched by the worldly things? Like, if you recall Patanjali's definition, klesha karma vipaka ashayir aparam rushtaha, untouched by klesha karma vipaka ashaya, untouched by klesha, which is avidya asmitadi, untouched by karma. We are always under the gravity of prarabdha karma, kriyamana karma, and sanchita karma. The karma doesn't leave us. Even after our life is over, it doesn't leave us. So that is the gravity, that's the grip of karma that we have. And then that principle is said to be free from it. So klesha karma vipaka, the fruition of karmas. We are constantly facing the fruition of karmas by way of happiness and sadness, by way of delight and sorrow. This is what our life is. If you remove all the delights and sorrows and sukha and dukkha, pain and pleasure, misery and delight, what is the life? So our life is totally subsumed, permeated, occupied completely by vipaka, karma phala. Whereas for him, no, he is beyond. So also ashaya, karma vasana, klesha vasana. About man, it is described in Upanishads as vasanamaya ayam purushaha. Vasanamaya. Maya means profused. Vasana profused is the life principle. We are vasana profused, whereas he is beyond, he is untouched. How is he untouched? Because he is rutam pibantau. Like a drunken person is free from all shackles, worldly shackles, mundane shackles. He is his own monarch. Similarly, the divinity is rutam pibanto, so beautifully, poetically put in barest of few words. So he is not only truth personified, but he is truth sunk, truth drunken. Therefore, he is in his own world. If he is transcendent principle, that is how it is transcendent. So that's how the transcendence is explained from one dimension in Kathopanishad. In vernacular, it can be described as he is Satyapi. Satyapi. Because a drunken people is called Madhyapi. Madhya means liquor. And one who is all the time under addiction of it is called Madhyapi, often drunken with Madhya, with liquor, etc. So, in vernacular, it would be Satyapi. This principle that we are discussing is Satyapi. So, just as you can imagine psychology of a Madhyapi, you can understand the psychology of a drunken person, or who is so addicted to drinking that all the time he will be in that his own world. So we understand psychology of Madhyapi, so also we can make an attempt to understand the very psychology of Satyapi. So we will have some clue to psychology of very divinity. And it will be so fascinating to imagine what the divinity is. So with this description that comes in Kathopanishad, we have some scope to look into very mindset, mind culture, mind matter of Bhagavan. Because he is Satyapi. So that's why it's a very fascinating definition that has come in Kathopanishad by way of Rutam Pibantau. The Upanishads, the seers in Upanishads, because all Upanishads are by Rishis. So seers in Upanishads certainly have an impressive analogy in the poetry, because Upanishads are poetic. So if the hangover of liquor, wine, can rise a drunken person above the worldly state into a pseudo transcendent state. These drunken people are in pseudo transcendent state, and the divinity in his hangover of truth is above the universe, and that is essential transcendence. So this is what I am trying to put across, that he is in essential transcendence, why a drunken person is in pseudo transcendence. So what is this transcendence? He is beyond karana and the kartavya. See, those who are not drunken, those are sensible persons, they are aware of their duties, what is called as duty-mindedness. Whereas a drunken person, when he is beyond it, Satyapi, you can now understand. So he is beyond vasanas, beyond anubandha, beyond kamana, being a Satyapi. He is beyond any desire, beyond any kamana. The Taittiriya Upanishad describes states of divinity, and it says, he desired, let me become many. Eko aham bahusyam. Taittiriya Upanishad 2.6. The Vedas also have such expression. The desire of desireless deity. The desire of personified desirelessness. And in Vedas and Upanishads, the divinity in first person exclaims, I am single, let me become many. That means being drunken with truth. He has desire as well as no desire. This is a desireless desire. He has desire, but yet is personification of desirelessness. Despite being Vigatakama, he is Satyakama. Now, what is this kind of desire, you see? In satsanga, you will be able to know this. See, what are our kamanas? What are our desires? Our desires are always pertaining to something that we don't have, but we want to have. We want to have it, but we don't have it, and therefore the desire bubbles up. So we don't have something, and therefore we desire. All that we don't have, therefore there is room for desires. Desires will come up because of something that we don't have. We are incapable of having it, or we don't have it. But this desire, the kama, with respect to Brahma Tattva or Ishwar Tattva or divinity, the God, is not like that. It is not that he doesn't have and therefore he has desire. So his desire is of unique class. That is the difference between the kama of Brahma Tattva, the kama of Bhagavat Tattva, kama of Ishwar Tattva, and our kama. We are mortals. So we definitely are going to have some desire where, in case where we don't have anything of it or we don't have sufficient of it, then we have desire. So there is lack of something, there is lacking in something in us. This is the case of mortals. But in his case, he lacks nothing, yet he has a desire. So the basis for his desire is unique. His kama is unique. He has kama, yet he has no kama. So why he has a kama is another kind of point of inquiry, because he is universal being. He creates the universe for the life principle. He doesn't have anything to desire from his own creation. He creates it for the life principle, which is a part of him. And therefore he has karma. He has karma for others. Whereas we have karma for ourselves. We mortals have desire for ourselves. We have desire for our own fulfillment. He has desire for not his own fulfillment because he is totally fulfilled. He is Satya Kama, Apta Kama. He has no kamana for himself, but he has kamana for the creation. That is unique kama for him. So when in Taittiriya Upanishad it is said that I am single, let me become many, it is not that he is lacking in something, but that is for his purpose as universal being. He is Vigata Kama, yet there is a Kama. But the Kama is having totally different basis. No unaccomplished condition, no incomplete condition, no shortcoming, no shortfall. Whereas in case of mortals, when we have desire, there is certainly a shortfall, there is certainly a deficiency, or there is definitely lack of something, and that's why we have desire. So our desire is because of lack, a lack of something, whereas his desire is totally different. So in satsanga, this is what is explained is what is his kind of karma. It's not that he doesn't have karma; he has a karma, but it is transcendent karma, unique to him. No one else will have such a karma. No one will have such a desire. So, desire despite desirelessness. And this is a unique condition. We now need to know the concept of desire and desirelessness, which I try to explain you. So, we mortals and the have one kind of the basis of desire, and divinity has another kind of basis of desire. In case of mortals, biological vasanas, including those of human being, the entire animate world has desire. So also human world has desire, and there is psychosis. Our vasana is a psychosis. Human vasanas are rooted in vikaras, kleshas, vikrutis, and deficiencies. So, we should not be comparing our desire with his desire, our kama with his kama. So, when he had desire, he desired, I am alone, let me become many, is some such thing. Not that he has vasanas in him. Another way to understand his psychodynamics, the psychodynamics of divinity, who is creator, who is taking care of the universe, who is formulating the universe, maintaining the universe, destroying in the universe. What are the psychodynamics? See, we habitually proceed to wash basin and brush our teeth and wash our mouth in the morning when we get up. How is that carried out? We don't have desire and passion to have a face wash and mouth wash and brushing the teeth, etc. So it is habituation to us. It has become habituation. The moment we get up, we just desirelessly walk to the wash basin and carry out the act of our mouth wash and face wash. So it has become so natural, so common and natural act of ours. We don't need any psychodynamics for that. We don't need any desire and passion to be doing it. We just do it very, very, very naturally. So that is our habituation. We are habituated to it. So this creation, maintenance, destruction, that the divinity carries out is all such habituation. He has been carrying it out for, like we carry out our mouthwash and face wash umpteen number of times, and in the morning we just walk to the wash basin without any desire, without any motive, without any drive, without any impellment, without any propelment. Why? Because it has become so natural to us and habitual to us. So similarly, all that the divinity does is like that. So even these prolific things like creating the whole universe, vast infinite universe, maintaining it and then destroying it, it is such a natural act for him that it is nothing different than we getting up in the morning and walking up to the wash basin and taking a face wash and mouthwash and brushing the teeth. That's how his activities are. It is not that he is not carrying out any activity. Then how that can be explained? How does he carry out his activities? That too on such a prolific scale. It is such a thing. Just as this is so simple, so natural, and so habitual for us, his activities are so habitual. The entire activity of creation, maintenance, destruction, and whatever else he might be doing. So, see how many mornings we have in our life and how many mornings so far we had in our life, but we are already habituated to getting up and walking to the wash basin. You can imagine, you might be 40, 50, 60, 70 years of age. How many mornings did you have in this life? Yet it has become habitual. But for this Brahma Tattva, 8,640 million years is his one day. Is his one day. And so far, infinite numbers of days, kalpas have passed. There is no count of kalpas. How many kalpas have so far elapsed? No count about it. Cannot be counting it. Countless, countless. So, he has 8,640 million mornings. Years into 360 days in his one day. So that's how he is habituated to all these activities. They are so natural, they are so meager, so trivial for him. So what all he does is so trivial to divinity. Or it is described, what is yawning to you and me? Do we have desire to yawn? Do we have any endeavor to be yawning? It is such a simple act of yawn. It is similarly for him. His creation, his maintenance act, his destruction act is so natural, so simple, so ordinary, like what is yawning for us. Another expression comes about his karmas. Just as baby on awakening starts moving the limbs without intention. It is very natural for baby to be moving its limbs. So also this universal activity of divinity is so natural, spontaneous, doesn't need any desire, doesn't need any motive, doesn't need any motivation. Just as the baby, the moment it is awake, it will start moving the limbs. So also the Bhagavad karma, the acts of divinity are of that kind. they are just a sport for him. Sport, ordinary sport for him. A mystic saint says that divinity is a mega baby, huge baby, which awakens each morning of his day and starts moving the limbs and flickering of the eyelids. And with that, the universal phenomenon of creation takes place. We flicker our eyelids, what happens? It's merely flicker of the eyes. But his flickering of the eyes does the whole universal phenomenalism to go into creation, maintenance, destruction. So that's how one of the mystic saints has described it. So he just, like the baby moves the limbs. If divinity, like a baby, just moves the limbs and the universal process gets kicked off. Universal process gets kicked off. Creation, maintenance, and dissolution. According to Sankhya, the equilibrium of gunas, equal state of gunas, equilibrium of gunas, samyavastha of gunas, that is just disturbed by such a thing. Like baby moves the limbs, or we flicker the eyelids, he just flickers the eyelids, and this phenomenalism gets on track. So the deluge is revoked. The deluge is revoked at the beginning of each kalpa. By such a simple act, there is no need of having big bang. There is no big bang. It's just flickering of the eyelids for him. His eyelids flicker and the things happen. Or like an infant baby moves the limbs, he moves the limbs and this creation happens in such a systematic manner. That's why this creation is called cosmos and not chaos. It has a system. So, when he moves the limbs, like baby moves the limbs so naturally, so spontaneously, so motivelessly, he does that. His movement of the limbs means all this cosmos starts getting unfolded, enfolded, and all that happens. In the cosmos, during beginning to end, all that happens very, very systematically. So, Sankhya speaks about Prakriti and Purusha. This is what that Purusha is, and this is what the Purusha does, and this is how the Purusha does. It's not a Herculean job. The mere presence of Purusha does, says Sankhya. So, these are the descriptions you get in Shastras. Bhagavad Gita describes that the Prakriti is his womb. Mama yoni mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham. It is my womb. And I keep the garbha in it. And then cosmological unfoldment takes place. So the divine is a unique kind of master of the universe. Everything truly, essentially belongs to him. It is from him. It is of him. That is what the Vedanta says. He is the Upadana Karana, he is the Nimitta Karana, and he is every kind of Karana. So it comes from him. And therefore they have the example of Urnanabhi. The Urnanabhi, that insect, turns out a material from its mouth and then casts a web and then indwells the web, stays in the web, ultimately swallows it takes it back. That's how it's all creation comes from Brahma, and then it also gets back to him. So the Urnanabhi Shruti is very well known in Vedanta. So it is such a simple thing for him. So these are a few descriptions which come in Upanishads for us to understand how what the divinity is and how does it work. So he is every possessor, he is the master, he is the material, he is the owner, he is the Lord, and experiences a sense of no loss of no gain in his creation. And now this divinity is controller, owner, master of all creation by being within it, immanently in it. Every subatomic particle to everything in the universe is indwelled by him and becomes the Antaryami, the internal ruler, informer. So that is how the Vedanta puts it. So one thing might be clarified here, that since divinity is a conscious principle, experience is admitted in God. Now, because any conscious principle, there has to be experience. So the experience is admitted in God because it's a conscious principle. Divinity is a conscious principle. So experience is admitted in the God, but the experience in the form of pain and pleasure is rejected. Experience is there because it's a conscious principle, but not the experience in the form of pain and pleasure, which is our experience. So this is rejected in him. The Sukha Dukkha is rejected in him, although he has experience. The Mundaka Upanishad says, Ananashnananyo abhichakashiti 3:1:1. It is said here that even if a galaxy gets added or deducted from the universe, it is akin to a vessel of water added or removed in ocean. You can remove a vessel full of water from ocean or add a vessel full of water in ocean. Nothing happens to ocean. What will happen to ocean? Will the ocean be delighted with one vessel of water poured into it? Or will it be sad by one vessel of water removed from it? Similar is the case here. So even if one galaxy goes away and another galaxy comes in, a deduction of one galaxy and addition of one galaxy, it really doesn't matter because of its infinitude. And therefore there is no joy and no sorrow. So that is what this Mundaka Upanishad is trying to tell us. So see how the Upanishads are trying to explain the psychology of divinity, psychology of God, psychology of Brahman, this universal principle. So again, this is a wonderful expression, wonderful analogy used here, and wonderful description. Ananashnananno abhichakashiti is what just now I told you by example here. That ocean and a vessel of water removed or added. Nothing happens to ocean. Ocean doesn't delight by somebody pouring a vessel of water. vessel full of water. Or it is not saddened by somebody removing a vessel full of water. Then we need to take up an incidental matter here. Divinity being a conscious principle, it is said to have unique passion dynamics. We should not be messing with our passion dynamics and the divinity's passion dynamics. We are sentient beings, we are conscious beings, and therefore we know passion dynamics, how they work. So it doesn't mean that it is also a conscious principle, therefore the passion dynamics would be working the same way. So we should not be messing up with it. The passion dynamics as enumerated in the example above, which I told you about, ocean and some water, vessel full of water. The divinity, the Paramatma, is universal conscious principle, but then there is also a finite principle of consciousness, but then there is also the difference in passion operations and passion existence. There is a reflected metaphysical experience of pain and pleasure in the finite soul. So in case of finite soul, now you are aware that this is a metaphysical principle. Our finite self is also metaphysical principle, and the experience is by reflections, not really direct. It is all game of reflections, it is all game of Maya. That if we have sorrows and delights, somebody takes away from something from us, and somebody adds something in our wealth. We are saddened and delighted respectively, but again, yoga philosophy tells us that it is all game of reflections and not really real. Anyway, divinity is thus again differently transcendent than the finite being. What and how it is the difference is between these two principles is a question that should come to inquisitive mind. The answer is Atma is differently abhokta and akarta, and the Paramatma is differently akarta and abhokta. The soul, the Atma, individual soul, what we call as individual soul, quite in a naive language, naive manner. The Atma and Paramatma both are essentially non-endurers, non-doers. They neither do nor endure. The Upanishadic passages tell us about this thing, but they also tell us about the difference between the two. The passage is well known from what is called as Dvasuparna Shruti in Mundaka Upanishad. Again, it's a beautiful description, because now you are all aware that we essentially are also non-doers and non-endurers. Divinity too is non-doer and non-endurer, but what is the difference? There is a wonderful passage which comes in Mundaka Upanishad, Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakhaya. So it says, wonderful passage, one should look into it, one should read it, very, very poetic and very, very reality divulging passage. So it says, the passage says, the two birds which are mutual companions and friends live on one and the same tree, but on two different branches. One is branch below the other branch, one is above the other branch. These birds are Jivatma and Paramatma, and that the tree is embodiment or this manifestation. One of the birds, the Jivatma, which is on the lower branch, eats the fruits of the tree, which are sweet and bitter. Sometimes sweet, sometimes bitter. Sometimes very, very, very bitter, sometimes very, very, very sweet. And then makes faces. If you eat something very bitter, what face do you make? If you eat something very, very sweet, what face do you make? You make different faces. So the Jivatma would be taking bite of the fruits which are available on this tree, that is the embodiment, and of course the fruits will be either bitter or sweet. And then of course it will be making those faces. But the other one, the Paramatma, which is on a higher branch, does not peck at the fruit, but is mere witness, being beyond sorrows and desires. The Jiva is Anisha, non-divine, while the Paramatma is Isha, divine. So we mortal souls are non-divine, and that is divine. So the bird on lower branch is finite being, non-divine, Anisha, and on higher being it is Isha, it is divine. So this is how the two finite and infinite beings are described in a passage of Mundaka Upanishad, which comes in 3.1.1 and 2. So those who are interested can be looking into that passage, beautiful passage, the poetry of these revealed, realized souls, the rishis. Anyway, here our body is described as a tree. Our embodiment is described as tree. And in this embodiment, we have these two birds. Dvasuparna, there are two birds. One is finite, consciousness principle, and the other one is divinity, the indweller. The fruits on the tree are karma phalas, in the form of worldly delights and worldly sorrows. The finite soul is caught in mundane conditions, taking bite of all these fruits which are karma phalas. But the one which is transcendent, the indweller, divinity, it is transcendent principle, and then it is in sorrowlessness. It doesn't go on biting the karma phalas, it is on a tree, a branch little above. So the both are embedded within ourselves, our embodiment. So this is how the Mundaka Upanishad has beautifully described with analogy. Now, let us try to proceed to understand the divinity described in these various texts. But enough for the time being. Rest of it in our next session. So, namaskar all of you.